if we were lucky. I mean, and it had the roller coaster and all that stuff. But this only had 2 rides. It had a Ferris wheel.
So this was the first park.
First
amusement park.
This was one of the first amusement parks built in the state of Iowa. Yes. There was two people from Des Moines and a guy from Dexter that put up their initial money, and then they sold shares, stocks into it, and built it up as such. But the main attraction was the swimming pool, Olympic-sized pool, and they filled the pool with a spring. There was a natural spring out there. It was called Marshall Springs. Now, the Marshall
does that still exist?
The spring. Are you going to go with me out there? Okay.
Yeah.
But when we go down the hill, which is the steepest hill in Dallas County, by the way, going down to the markers, you're gonna run across an area that the road is buckled, where there's a dent in the road. That spring still goes underneath the road there.
Wow.
And when they built that road in like 1967, 66, 67, the old timers out there told these people that were building this road, if you build this road here, you're going to have problems because this spring runs through here and it's going to erode the base of your road every year. And excuse me, I got so many damn coughs. This spring that's out there, I mean, it goes underneath the road, and about every 5 years they're out there repairing the road after the old timers told them. But the Marshall family founded Dexter. They were thinking the railroad was going to come through. They did, and they bought up a bunch of land out here, and they established Dexter. Was going to name it Marshalltown, but there was already Marshalltown, so they named it after a racehorse that was in the news at that time. He had broken the trotting record.
Oh, okay.
Three times. So they named it Dexter, the one horse town. But anyway, one of the brothers bought land out there around where Dexfield Park was eventually going to be. It was up on the hill. And him and his sons found this spring, and they decided they were going to sell the water. I mean, for medicinal purposes and all that. And that was one of the big draws when they built this park, was come out and swim in the water and drink. There's a row of drinking fountains, drink the water, and you're going to feel better by doing it. But anyway, this guy kind of established probably one of the first damn resorts in the state of Iowa out there on the hill. And him and his sons built it was either 6 or 9, they had bathtubs. And they would get the water and they warm it up and they put it in these copper bathtubs, and then they would have clients from the area and come out from Des Moines, ride the train out or whatever, and go out there and soak in this water and make money. And it was a high class place. It had croquet courts and fancy ass stuff that important people back in the day liked to do. Sure. And that kind of thing. So anyway, fast forward a little bit, and this two people from West Des Moines and a guy from Dexter, and I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but they put up the money, sold stock, and they built this park down at the bottom of the hill. And the pool was the main thing that they built. It was the cement, the cement pond I always called it, but water from that spring was coming into the pool constantly, and it was draining out that far end where the diving tower was at. There was a area, but there was always water coming in. But the water was never filtered, or it was never chlorinated or anything like that. So you can imagine what it was like. In fact, I was doing a program once, and there was this lady that I knew that was at this assisted living place, and she called me over afterwards and said that she had gone swimming in that pool. Her name was Doris Kipping. She lived in Redfield, and she said, "Yeah, I went swimming in that pool." And I said, "Well, tell me what it was like." She said, "Well, we had to be very careful when we stepped into the pool because we could slide and hit our heads." And I said, "Well, why was that?" And she said, "Well, there was about this much sludge in the bottom of that pool." Wow. So I don't know how often they cleaned it out.
Oh my God.
But they get 3,000 or 4,000 people on a weekend out there.
Wow, no kidding.
To go swimming in that pool. So from like 1916, the good years were from like 1916 to the mid-20s. I've read newspaper articles where, in the mid-20s things weren't as clean. It was kind of a, you know, it wasn't the place that it was in its earlier years. Of course, then the Depression hits in '29, and it closes because people can't afford to go out there anymore, and it reopens briefly in '32. Then it closes completely, and it's sold off. They sell the property, but everything was, I mean, everything was out there when Bonnie and Clyde were out there, except Bonnie and Clyde. And when we go out there, I'll show you. But like in this picture, you kind of see it. This sits down the river valley. There were hills going up, and there was a campground that was up above in that area. That they had cleared out areas in the timber where people could bring their sleeping bags and whatever they did to camp. They, of course, they didn't have motorized vehicles like today, campers and that kind of thing. But they would go up there and camp and then walk down the hill, and they paid their admission to go to the amusement park. And lots of people like to camp out up there. I mean, they like to do that. But anyway, that campground was there. The park was abandoned, and for some reason, Clyde Barrow knew about it. And that was always the big question.
Do you know how? Did they know how he knew about it?
The only thing that I can think was, I mean, they liked coming to Iowa, and they liked coming to Iowa because it wasn't because Iowa nice. It was because nobody in Iowa knew who they were.
Right.
And you know, in May of 1933, the town constable.
It's a lot like Jesse James going to Nashville because nobody knew who he was.
Right. I mean, But anyway, so in May of 1933, at one of the gas stations in Dexter, John Love, who was the town constable at the time, said that there was a car and there was 5 people and they were having car trouble, and there was one of the women that was in the car that had the big long boots that Blanche wore. She had those long, I don't know what they called those kind of boots.
Like a riding boot, some type of riding boot.
And John said that he went up and talked to him, but this was in May of 1933. They could have been staying out there at that time. They could have been, I think they drove out that way, and I think they drove down the hill, and I think there was probably a sign there on that road, that when you go north on that county road, that probably said Dexfield Amusement Park.
Right.
And Clyde probably saw it and said, well, hell, I wonder what that is.
Right.
And so they drove out there, and this road, this campground was like a half a mile off the road. It was back in the timber and brush. Like I said, they had cleared off areas where people could set up their sleeping bags and tents and that kind of thing. And he went back there, and they found that, and they're thinking, this is not bad, because it's off the road. You can barely see it from the road, and you know, we can come here and nobody's probably going to bother us, even though it's private property. Nobody's going to bother us out here in the boonies, because this park had been abandoned and so on. And he was right. I mean, nobody went out there to see, but John Love, the town constable, there's a picture of John Love back here. But you know, after this shootout in Platte City, they made a beeline to Iowa. They came up we think Highway 169. They'd stopped in outside of Mount Air at a gas, or like a country store. They started and bought lunch meats and sandwiches and things like that. Continued north. Like I said, they might have taken the back road, but we think they were probably on 169. They came up through and came to Adel, came across, and ended up back out there north of Dexter. And Clyde made a beeline for that. I mean, they went right there and they knew about it, and they knew that they could be there, and nobody was going to bother them. There never would have been a shootout. There never would have been a shootout except for this guy right here. This fellow right here sitting in that. His name's Henry Nye.
So he discovered him there.
Yep, he was out there hunting blackberries. in July of 1933, and the last time, or it's been several years ago, I found a blackberry patch out there. It was about 40 yards, 50 yards from where Bonnie and Clyde were camped out. I would imagine it was probably some of the same bushes. I mean, not exactly the same, but blackberries are perennials. I mean, they come up, every year. But he, excuse me, he walked through their camp. 5 people. He said, I saw 5 people. He said they were rough-looking people. I saw bloodied bandages, bloodied shirts hanging up. And he said, I didn't even make eye contact with them because I didn't want to. And he said, I kept right on walking, and they didn't stop him. And he went back. He was a hired hand. He was a farm hand. And went back to his house, and he called John Love and told John Love about seeing these people on the private property. John Love's back here. There's John Love.
That's him.
That's him.
Is that his badge?
Yes, it is.
I got a picture of those.
Yeah, that's John. He's the town. He just become the town constable. Yeah, and those are his badges. I know where his service revolver is too, but they won't sell it to me. So they won't sell it too much. Well, they want too much money for the museum anyway. But I know where that's at. There's a guy in.
That would be nice to have.
Oh God, yeah,
really nice to have.
Wonderful. I've every once in a while I'll find people will tell me about guns that they have. I have a gun that was out there.
So this gun was out there that day? Who had this gun?
A guy by the name of Doyce Pitts. Doyce Pitts was 17 years old.
So that was that young man that they grabbed and deputized and brought along. And this was the rifle that had.
That's his shotgun.
So I'm holding a gun that was at the Bonnie and Clyde.
There you go.
Wow.
There you go. A model, I don't know what the model is. It's a Savage 410 shotgun. A 410.
Could you take a picture?
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, that is awesome.
A 410.
That is really awesome.
When you think about it,
I got chills running down my spine.
Me too. It does me too.
Yeah.
He was up against a Browning automatic.
Yeah.
A Colt 45 automatic. Yeah.
And he brought his 410.
And he brought his 410 single shot.
Single shot.
But there were a lot of them in that posse that had shotguns that day. And of course, Bonnie got shot 3 times. Clyde got shot in the shoulder, behind the ear, and in the leg. The W.D. Jones, the teenager that was with him, got shot in the chest several times by shotguns. So much so that the posse thought that probably they'd be picking up bodies.
Yeah. Yep.
On the trail.
Well, they got Buck, right?
They got
him good. Yeah.
Shot him only once in the back.
Yeah.
Although I've got articles. There's a guy that had a Thompson submachine gun. His name was Herschel Keller, and he was a dentist from Des Moines. He was part of the National Guard. He had a Thompson, and I read his story that was written like in 1977, and he said he shot Buck at least 7 times in the back.
Really?
As Buck was hightailing him. So I shot him at least 7 times. Well, I've got Dr. Chapler's report of Osborne and Chapler, and when Buck and Blanche got caught, and they brought him to where the library is now. We'll go out there and take a look at it. And it was a 2-story, and their clinic was up above, and he wrote up a big report in. Well, this was probably did it at the time, but when the Bonnie and Clyde movie came out in '67. They contacted him about, they knew that the doctors and Dexter's treated him, Buck and Blanche. And so he wrote a detailed letter, which I have it at home, about what they did to Buck and Blanche when they were there. And when Dr. Osborne and Chapler examined Buck at the clinic there, they had found that he had been shot once.
Only once in the back.
Once in the back. Not 7.
Not 7 times.
Not 7 or 8 times. once.
Well, in the movie, they have a headshot. Because if I remember right.
That was in Platte City. Platte City.
So he was hit in Platte City.
Not in Dexter.
Not in Dexter.
No.
Okay.
And you'll see a lot.
Because they hit Platte City. That's where they got shot up in Platte City. And they were dropped.
Yeah, and you read a lot of stories that say that that about Buck got killed out here. Mm-hmm. Buck didn't get killed out here. He made it into the hospital. Mm-hmm. I mean, he had a 3-inch piece of his skull that was gone, mm-hmm. but he was still alive, and he was still eating. He was still drinking. He was taking aspirin. Mm-hmm. In fact, he told Osborne and Chaplin, he said, yeah, he said, it hurts a little bit, but he said, with aspirin, I can control the pain.
Yeah.
And so he's still eating and drinking and smoking and so on, but dying. I mean, he was dying.
But he was dying.
Yeah, he was dying.
Yeah.
But he was still doing those things. But the thing was, Dr. Osborne and Chaplin commented in their report about they were impressed with how they had taken care of that head wound. And I mean, the way they were taking care of it was that they were buying hydrogen peroxide.
Oh.
And they were pouring hydrogen peroxide on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Directly.
Wow.
Directly
wow.
on it.
Wow.
And yeah. But anyway, no, this gun is quite an artifact because I was doing a program up in Woodward, Iowa, and there was a lady there, and she said, yeah, she says, my granddad was in that posse. My granddad was in that posse. And I said, well, that's pretty cool. She says, I have his gun. And I said, well, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah.
And she came back to well, she said that day, she said, would you like to see it? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. So she brought it, I did another approach, she brought it up there again so I could see this gun. And then she says, you want to take it on loan down to the museum? And I said, no, I don't want to do that because if somebody comes in and steals it, then, I would feel terrible about it.
Right.
And so this has been 4 or 5 years ago, she said, I got from one of her friends called me and says she wants to give it, she wants to donate the gun, that she's moving to Arizona, she has no use for the gun, and she wants you to have the gun in the museum. I said, well, we will certainly take it.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. And so that's how I ended up with that particular gun, which is like you said, you feel. That's the way I feel too. Every time.
It's a piece of history.
Yeah.